Welcome to the TSG Multimedia Podcast for November 2018. We're sponsored in part this month by Podomatic and the TSG Train Crew on Patreon. Thank you. I have some great news. October was extremely busy, so I have a lot to share with you. Let's jump right in so that you have an idea of what to expect in the coming months. One quick note, we received the first batch of TSG branded shirts. And I showed you the mug last time. These were both designed for Patreon supporters, and you can find out how to get yours by going to patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. If you become part of the TSG Train Crew by supporting the channel on Patreon, you also get bonus content and sneak previews of upcoming programs that aren't made available to everyone else until much later, and sometimes not even at all. So find out what you've been missing. Once again, it's patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. The first weekend of October was spent in Utah with Mike Ninneman, Gary Perazzo, and my top secret travel companion. On Friday the 2nd, we drove all the way out to Brigham City, Utah, which is just north of Ogden. The next morning, on the 3rd, we went to the Promontory Summit National Historic Site. There's a museum there, and it's also the site where the Golden Spike ceremony to commemorate the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad took place back in May of 1869. We got to see replicas of the historic locomotives that were present at the ceremony back in the 1860s. Sadly, the original locomotives were not preserved, so the Central Pacific 440 number 60, better known as the Jupiter, and the Union Pacific 440 number 119, that are there now are replicas based on the originals. They run these replicas out of an engine house and pose them in order to represent where the originals were when the Golden Spike was driven. The ceremony is narrated live by a park ranger. Other than the screaming toddlers, it was a really cool experience. We went to Ogden shortly after the Golden Spike ceremony was over to meet some of the friends I made on the trip to Salt Lake City that was taken back in June to the N-Scale convention. So Josh McMurrin, Alvin Gilbert, and their friend Josh Walton met us at the Railroad Museum in Ogden. We had a look around the static equipment displays outside as well as the displays in the museum before heading over to Weber Canyon, where the Joshes and Alvin showed us some cool places to catch train action. Josh McMurrin is also known as the guy with the Metallica shirt from the Golden Spike Model Railroad Club on the N-Scale convention video I mentioned a second ago. He's also been posting a lot of really great photos on the TSG Facebook page since October, so thanks for that, Josh. I really appreciate the help. Alvin earned the nickname Fabio during the most hilarious photo shoot I have ever witnessed, and we ended the day feasting on pizza in Ogden. The next day, we went back to Promontory Summit to see more of the historic site and to record the replica locomotives again in a different place. It was cold and windy, but Mike decided he wanted to stay, so Gary, Sydney, and I went back to Weber Canyon again to meet up with the Utah crew. This time, they brought even more guys with them, including Warren Johnson. Warren was also on the video about the N-Scale convention trip. In that video, he showed us around his HO scale layout. You don't see him on the video, but you can hear him talking as we watch his trains run around his layout. Warren worked for the Union Pacific for decades, and he's been photographing trains on the Union Pacific Evanston sub for even longer than that. Quick note of thanks to Warren for posting some of his awesome photos to the TSG Facebook page this month as well. I think they provide some really excellent variety, especially since many of them are historic in a way, capturing equipment that we'll really never see on a main line again. Anyway, that day Warren took us to some of his favorite spots. Fabio brought some donuts from his favorite donut shop, and they were really good too. I always say I've never met a donut I didn't like, and these were no exception. There were a couple more guys in our group this day, Earl and Stan. We chased trains that whole afternoon, getting some really neat shots in Weber Canyon and Echo Canyon, which is a little further up the line. What a great day. I want to thank all of our Utah friends for showing us around. Your hospitality made our trip much more memorable, and I really hope that I can come back and see you all again soon. On October 11th, I met a guy named Piyush who's been developing a new kind of control system for locomotives. You might have heard of this. He was at the national show in Kansas City this past summer, and his product is called LocoFi. It uses Wi-Fi and a phone app. It seems like a pretty cool thing to me. I think it has a lot of potential, and I'm working on seeing if I can get a control module to install into a locomotive in an upcoming episode of John's Models that I'd like to do. Speaking of that, I want to mention real quick, as the weather gets less inviting outside, I'll be spending a lot more time focusing on model-related content for the channel. Just as there was a lot of outdoor content over the summer, it'll be the opposite for the winter, where I'm inside doing more stuff in the comfort of my heated studio. On the 12th, I went with my friend Dave Adams to a private layout owned by another DCC Lunch regular named Seth Newman. His layout represents part of the Bay Area that I'm very familiar with, and it's very well done. I've been talking to him about doing a layout tour of his layout for quite some time, and it finally happened. As a matter of fact, it finally happened today. So that's the next layout tour that's going to be in the schedule that's coming up in December. So, of course, we all went to the DCC lunch after hanging out with Seth for a while looking at his layout. And while at the DCC lunch, I mentioned that I was actively seeking more layouts to make videos of. All the guys there either have layouts or they know a bunch of people with layouts. So I was hoping that by suggesting the idea, it might generate some opportunities to see more and maybe even get them in the production schedule so that I can share them with you. I wasn't disappointed. More about that in a minute, though. On Saturday the 13th, Nice Hands Nick had a birthday party in Hollister. Now, I realize this is kind of not train related except for one thing. Kevin Hill also went, and he told me that day that he was going to do something with his dad the following day that I might be interested in. So, what were they doing, you ask? On the 14th, the Bay Area Garden Railroad Society held a swap meet in Pleasanton. I'm not really a garden scale railroader per se, but Kevin is, and I wasn't doing anything else that day, so I tagged along with Kevin and his dad Curtis to the meet. It was cool because even though the meet was really small, I still ended up seeing a few people that I know there. Joe Barker and Nancy Norris from the SLHRS were both there, as well as Eric Child from the Fern Creek and Western. And it's always really great to see them. We stayed for a little while, and then as we were leaving the fairgrounds, Kevin suggested that we should go see a special train that was running in Niles Canyon for a special event. We chased that train down the canyon, stopping to get some shots of it at Farwell, and then when we got down into Niles, we took a few minutes to go into Niles Depot so that Kevin and Curtis could see the N-scale and HO scale layouts there. After saying hello to some of the people I know at that depot, we grabbed some pizza from Bronco Billy's to go, and then we headed back into the canyon to Farwell, where we had a very informal picnic on some discarded railroad ties, waiting for the train to come back up the hill. I didn't have my camera with me, but I did have my phone, so at some point I started making some really raw and impromptu videos with it, sort of a, chasing train style. We chased the train up to Sonol where it was ending its run, and now I have to tell you, we were having a really great time, so I suggested when we were leaving that maybe they'd be interested in seeing the SBHRS. They've never been there before. So quick call to Wiley, and in about 30 minutes we were at the SBHRS Museum. Big thanks to Wiley. Thanks, John, for letting us in so that I could show the guys what's in there. They really did enjoy it, and as we were leaving, we made a quick stop to the interlocking tower, which they also enjoyed, and then we called it a day. I have to tell you, that was an unexpected full day's worth of foamy fun with those guys, and talk about laughs. I've told you about the hills before. It's impossible to have any time without having a blast, right? Hanging out with them. So thanks very much for the great time, guys. I don't know if and when I'll share my phone captured video footage from that day, but if I do, you'll certainly hear about it first. On the 15th, I met Jim Betts from the DCC Lunch at the Agnew Depot in Santa Clara to view the Cal Central Club layout. This is a Proto-Lance layout that's pretty much completed. It's obvious that some very good modelers are members at this club, as most of the scenes are very well done. Its backdrops were painted by Mike Kotowski, a very well-known artist whose art appeared on the Orchard Supply Hardware calendar for many years. Mike specializes in railroad art, and I thought the most impressive backdrop was the one of Mount Shasta. I'm sure you'll get a chance to see it again whenever the layout tour takes place, and that's one I am definitely looking forward to. On October 16th, I went to Mountain View to see Ted Stevens' layout. This is another private layout, and it's built in a commercial office park. I met Ted, as well as his friends Paul and Earl, who help with the layout. It's another really nice one with some great scenery and nicely detailed mining industries. Ted took us to lunch at a nearby Japanese restaurant. I had never eaten Japanese food. It was pretty good. The company was better, but the food was also very good. On the 17th, I had John Wiley over for a production session. He's going to be on the next Model Railroading 101. I'll talk about this more when we're covering the upcoming programs for November. But for now, I'll just say it's a good one that you will not want to miss. It's more about JMRI. On the 18th, I met with Dan Lieberman of Caltrain for this month's interview. We met at the Santa Clara station in the late morning, and I've been seeing Dan mostly on Facebook as I'm subscribed to the Caltrain Facebook page, and he appears on a lot of videos for that page. I had hoped to conduct the interview out on the platform, but there was a recurring announcement being blasted over the PA directing passengers to go to the middle platform because trains were bypassing the southbound platform due to some nearby track work. We ended up going in the interlocking tower instead to avoid the audio, messing up the interview. The tower provided some relief from the intercom, but the windows created a backlighting problem that I wasn't really prepared for. In any case, despite my problem with the lack of supplemental lighting that I should have brought, the interview is still very interesting because Dan and I talked about the Caltrain electrification project, among other things. Let's take a look. All right, so I'm here with Dan Lieberman from Caltrain. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
How you doing, rail fans? Good to see you.
You may have seen Dan. He posts videos to Facebook, right, as part of your job with Caltrain, huh?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on everywhere people are watching us. We try to get the word about what's going on in the rails and what there is to see.
That's what you're talking about when I see it. Imagine that, right? So, Dan, just for our viewers here, why don't you talk a little bit about who you are? Like, how did you get involved with Caltrain? Do you like trains? That kind of thing. How long have you been involved with Caltrain? That kind of thing.
I started Caltrain in January of 2017. So at a fun time for the agency, just as electrification was first getting off the ground. It's I've been a San Mateo County resident since I was about 3 years old. I'm still living in San Mateo, which is still a lovely place to be. And Caltrain is part of my daily commute. It's I hop on a Samtrans bus and get the 250, take it over to San Mateo Station, hop on down to San Carlos, and get to work.
Right. So now as part of your job, you probably get that as a perk, don't you?
Oh, it's a pretty nice perk.
Yeah, that's good.
if they can't hook us up with the Go Pass when we're working there, I'm going to have some problems with management. So I'm glad we can take care of it.
That's just something you need to take care of if you're operating a transportation system, right? Taking care of the employees. Oh boy! So, what exactly do you do for Caltrain?
All right, well, I'm a public affairs specialist,
okay.
Which basically I talk for a living, which is a pretty sweet deal. It's and I do this for the San Mateo County Transit District, which covers Caltrain, Samtrans, and the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. So it's really just it's a lot of stuff. It's talking to the media. I write a lot of press releases a week. It's in fact I got to get back to the office after this and put one together about our express bus study. I do some blog work. I've got a few columns. I do On the Move, which highlights various bus routes throughout the system. I do the Choo Choo Train, which highlights good restaurants along the Caltrain line. So it's always looking for recommendations. You can find me at Lieberman Tweets on Twitter if you have something to recommend. But yeah, just anything relating to public transportation in San Mateo County ends up being something I talk about.
So Dan, Caltrain's in the process of being electrified. Why don't you talk a little bit about what that means and how it works?
All right. It's long story short, it's a really big deal. We've known that electrification of Caltrain is necessary for quite some time, even shortly after the Joint Powers Board came about and acquired Caltrain back in '92. The rubber really hit the road around 2012 when an agreement was struck between Caltrain and the High Speed Rail Authority where High Speed Rail would provide some funding to develop electrification. That, along with coupled with local, state, and federal funds, really brought the $2 billion together to help put this together. Yeah, it's a big deal because electric trains are they're cleaner, they're quieter, they're more efficient, and they can haul more people. It's the EMUs, or electric multiple units, which I'm sure your viewers know about.
Many do. Yes, I'm sure they do.
They have their own individual power source. So rather than being essentially dragged by a locomotive, they have their own power. So it's easier to do larger train sets. We're going to launch in 2022. With at least a minimum of a 6-car train set. If some things go well for us, and we can get the cars necessary, we can possibly launch with 7. It's and certainly the intention is to move to 7 and possibly beyond that, just so we can keep increasing our capacity. It's which is really necessary. Since EMUs can accelerate and decelerate faster, we can actually fit in more train sets per hour.
Mm-hmm.
So we can increase capacity both on individual train sets and overall throughout the system, which is just desperately needed. I mean, if you're riding Caltrain at peak hours at this point, it's crowded. There's and it's very clear why it's crowded if you get on 101, which is even more crowded. I was at the groundbreaking of the Burlingame interchange a little while back, where they told me about 250,000 cars go through there every day. So that's the norm for 101 in San Mateo County, a quarter million cars. And that's and Caltrain's carrying 65,000 people, and that which is a very necessary relief valve. It's just so crowded out there, and it's and Caltrain so Caltrain just needs to be able to keep up, needs to be able to take more people on. And because we're seeing growth, we've been growing by about 6% ridership a year for the last decade. It's tripled since 2004, and the demand is not going away. We're also seeing growth south of San Jose, going out to Gilroy with more people riding that, and it's. But long story short, we've got a lot of people. Caltrain is at its capacity and needs to find a way to grow in order to meet that growing demand.
Right. Something you mentioned a second ago, and it wasn't on my original notes, but something you said made me think of an issue I keep seeing in media from South County, Monterey area. Something about how someone somewhere is going to extend to Salinas and down in that area, but I don't think the author knows the difference between Caltrain and Caltrans because it's always very nebulous about who exactly is going to serve that. Do you know the answer to that?
It's I know that it's too early to say who that is. We have heard of those ideas. I don't think we have any formal opinion on them. But I mean, generally we're supportive of extending transit anywhere where the demand exists. So if we can find that demand and find a way of meeting that demand, then that's certainly something we can look into, and and hopefully we can find a way to make it work for everybody.
Okay.
I mean, really, what we're seeing, with the high price of housing in the Bay Area, coupled with the constantly growing economy, is people are very willing to live an hour or 2 hours away from work, just to make it work, to be able to own a home and still make a good Bay Area wage. And the crazy thing is when you have, I've talked to people who are driving in from Vacaville or Vallejo or Stockton, which is a commute that would drive me absolutely crazy.
I think that might be a little loud.
I think probably. we can start going over.
Sure, no, that's fine. Or just we'll wait for the train to go by, and you can continue with your Vacaville and so forth.
There you go.
Okay. Had to stop for a passing train.
Yeah,
it happens.
The trains take priority. You can't tell them to wait for things like this. They get really picky about it.
It's like the old days, and we're a freight train, so the passenger trains take priority over our interview.
There you go. But it's like I said, we see people living very far afield from the Bay Area and making that commute in, willing to spend 3-4 hours a day in a car. I mean, and which is crazy to me, but it's clearly something that people are willing to do. So, providing a transit option, is that can get people off the road and find find something that's better, is better for them, for their mental health, for time with their family, is better for our environment, it's better for our roads. Because it's a tremendous amount of particulate matter that we're putting out, that we're breathing in. It's a disaster for our carbon footprint as well, right. And it's something that that needs proactive work in order to prevent. Yeah. It's some of our estimates on Caltrain electrification, by 2040, the electrified system should be able to remove 619,000 vehicle miles driven per day. Which is just an absurd number, but that's where we are with this funny point in Bay Area history, right. Where people are willing to make these crazy super commutes in order to get by.
Right, and as someone who really loves traffic, that would be me. And all the viewers know this.
Everybody loves traffic.
Oh yeah,
it's just one of the
highlights. It's one of the highlights of any trip for me.
You get to sit in your car and wonder where you went wrong in your life, and curse at other people who drive like idiots. Like who doesn't want more of that?
There's lots of time for introspection when you're sitting behind someone doing nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
But you said something.
I mean, at least I get to listen to your podcast while I'm driving. So that's
true. Oh, actually, that's true. You should definitely listen to the podcast while you're driving.
But you can also do that on the train and not hate yourself as much.
That's true. Plus, if there's Wi-Fi enabled on trains, some trains have Wi-Fi enabled too, and buses do too. You could listen to it without even going through your data on your phone. Which
is a lovely segue to the idea that the electrified system is actually going to have Wi-Fi on board. That is something we've heard loud and clear from a lot of people. It's that's making sure that it's a strong enough system that can support, because we're again, we have a Silicon Valley audience, so there's going to be people who are doing some heavy duty stuff on the train every day, and everyone's going to be doing it. So it's going to be a challenge making sure we have a provider that can shoulder that burden. But we want to make sure that that's something that is going to be happening.
Yeah, well, one would hope in this area that there's a company that can provide that.
If we can't find it here, something has gone wrong.
Well, we'll see though. I mean, because I've been places where you wouldn't expect good internet, and it's better than what I get at my house. So
you can be surprised,
right? So you never know. So I'm curious about something, and you were talking about the EMUs, and this is something that, as you were talking about it, I know a little bit about trains. Okay, that's kind of what the show's about. Mm-hmm. And I did not know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did I hear you right, that all the EMUs actually powered? They all have powered axles?
Yes.
Is that how the acceleration works so well?
That is my understanding. Yes, and it's it's essentially, rather than having a full locomotive, there's just going to be a cab for the engineer. Right. Somewhat similar to a BART train. It's that's the beautiful thing about it. It's whereas a diesel train, if you start tacking on extra cars, it's going to create a lot more drag, and it's going to it's just going to slow down the whole thing. It's here that's not the case. You can just keep swapping more in, and there may not. I mean, like really, the upward limit on cars is probably going to be determined more by platform length, right, than it will by the ability to move the vehicle, and that gives us some more flexibility, and but also just is really going to increase our capacity.
Sure.
At all hours of the day.
I think having a problem with platform length is a nice problem to have to solve, right? That means you have all those people off the road. Right.
Exactly, and certainly it's a problem that's much easier to deal with than the ability to fit that many train sets into an hour.
Sure, yeah, for sure. Because if you can have the difference between having 8 or 10 cars in one train, but instead of having 2 trains with 5 cars, mm-hmm. Or 6, whatever. I mean, because I've noticed that the trains do run with more cars these days, mm-hmm. as opposed to what I was used to when we did the Caltrain 2005 video 10, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
They had 5-car trains. That was it. Now I've seen 6-car trains here and there.
Yeah, but ultimately that's, for what I understand, that's for the most part our ceiling. We start getting diminishing returns if we tack onto that. With the electric trains, that's not going to be the case. It's to some degree the sky's the limit. But sure. Provided we have enough vehicles to meet that demand, which is the goal for the launch was to get 75% of the fleet electrified. Now some funding has become available that might make it possible to be fully electrified at launch, at least from Tamiami to San Francisco. The down south to Gilroy, that's not currently electrified, and that is. Well, that's a longer story.
Yeah, that's all UP track too, though.
Exactly. So that is a much larger issue that may not have an answer coming soon.
That's something to tie in with the high-speed rail later, probably.
Yeah,
would be my guess.
I think that's a safe bet.
Yeah. So, what else is going on with Caltrain and transportation around the Bay Area that you're aware of?
A lot. I think one of the big pieces of it, Caltrain's been working on the Caltrain business plan for a while now. The central push of it being looking out to 2040 and trying to predict how our system is going to change, how demand on our system is going to change. Ultimately, a big piece of responsible transportation policy is looking at the crystal ball and seeing what's coming, what's on the horizon, so you can get ahead of those curves instead of being constantly behind it. What it's looking like. We could potentially have a 300% increase in demand on the system.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's a big number, and it sounds crazy until you start thinking about everything that's happening. The city of San Francisco recently signed off on the Peninsula Avenue alignment, which is the downtown extension, which is the plan to extend Caltrain to the Transbay Terminal. Very rough timelines. Talk about 2029 being a goal for that. Ultimately, there's a lot of funding issues that need to be answered first. But yeah, the goal is to get that further in the city, which could really pick up, just increase. We're going to see. We can see a lot more demand out of that. We see a lot more people, seeing the option to take advantage of Caltrain. And because of an electrified system with an expanded capacity, it's whereas now that demand would be very difficult to meet. We would actually have room on board to accommodate it. But that and that'd be a big deal in and of itself. But at the same time, we also have the discussions between Samtrans and Facebook regarding the rebuilding of the Dumbarton Rail Bridge,
right?
Which also brings into which would connect us with ACE and Capitol Corridor. So people coming in from the East Bay and beyond could have access to Caltrain tracks, which is another source of demand. We're also seeing, as I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a lot of growth down by Gilroy, where more people again, living farther out, where they can buy a house and making the commute up. So being able, finding a way to meet that demand. And the peninsula is growing by leaps and bounds as well. If you go up our line, you can see a lot of development projects, transit-oriented development in particular. It's right by my office in San Carlos, where where land that used to just be scrub brush and parking lots is now apartment complexes. Hayward Park has gone through huge developments in recent years, and there are more on the way. South San Francisco, where I was at just yesterday, we've got big apartments coming up near where the new South City Station is going to be. So as these transit-oriented developments start coming to fruition, people start moving in. That's a population of people who are who we expect to be moving there specifically to take advantage of Caltrain. So there's a lot. And the Warriors.
Oh, right.
The Warriors are moving into San Francisco. Not very far from our line. Which is obviously Giants service has been a huge deal for us. Mm-hmm. We've got a lot of Giants fans who want to take advantage of Caltrain. We're going to see Warriors fans doing the same thing. There's going to be a lot more reasons to be on Caltrain, and thankfully, because of electrification, we're going to be able to have a shot at keeping up with that demand.
Sure.
But there's a lot going on, and and electrification is just a very necessary piece of trying to stay ahead of that.
So I keep hearing about this closure in San Francisco, but I'm unclear. What exactly is that all about?
Well, that's directly related to electrification. North of the Bayshore Station on weekends, we've been suspending service. Samtrans is providing a bus bridge so we can still get people up to the 22nd Street and and San Francisco stations at 4th and King. So if you're still heading north, we've still got you covered. That's free of charge. But we've had to suspend service on weekends because work for electrification has to happen in the 4 tunnels. Particularly, we need to. There's notching going on, which is just extending the tunnel a little bit in order to accommodate the new trains.
Are they a little bit wider?
A little bit wider.
Oh, okay.
It's in addition, we're installing anchor bolts in the ceiling, which is going to support the system that provides electricity to the trains. It's because they have the train will have a pantograph connected to the third rail. Essentially, the idea is rather than having the third rail on the ground where it's a potential safety concern, we keep it up high where unless you're particularly tall, you're not going to be able to run into. In addition, there's also some drainage work that's necessary, so we're killing two birds with one stone and taking care of that. And yeah, that's going to go on for until late spring. The goal is to have that done by the time giant season starts up again. And it's just and this is going to be the biggest disruption throughout the entire electrification process.
Just this point where they're retrofitting the tunnels basically for electricity.
And these tunnels were built in 1905. Like these are so there's we need to get in there. You need to take your time. You need to make sure everything is done appropriately considering. But it's that's it's a big part of the project, and it's just necessary to get the whole thing working.
Yeah, it's funny you should mention about the tunnels being that old. A lot of people don't realize, a lot of people who live in the area don't realize that this rail line has been there since the 1860s.
Oh, yeah.
So this is infrastructure that's been around. Right?
It's I don't know if Abe Lincoln came out and autographed one of the rails, but he practically could have. It's funny to think. Particularly in these discussions about electrification, it's really funny to think that these tracks were laid when this was just farmland and dusty fields, and it was there when it was when it was orange groves, and to think and going back then, I don't think anyone predicted one day this is going to be one of the hottest economies on earth, one of the biggest job markets. There's going to be the biggest steel companies around here, and it's so and ultimately the real challenge is making sure that infrastructure that was built for a much quieter, sleepier place is brought up to speed and can meet the needs of a very different place.
Excellent. Well, hey, thanks for stopping down here to talk to us. Maybe someday we'll have you back on again. I mean, as this stuff develops, because, it's hard to keep, there's so many places to get information, it's hard to keep track. And I don't know that people come to the podcast necessarily to get important information like this, but it's cool to have you on.
Well, this is what they pay me the big bucks for. I'm happy to get out there and talk about what Caltrain's up to. We've got some exciting stuff going on. Everyone should get a chance to hear about it.
And they're paying him big bucks because he's been smiling the whole time.
Well, I'm just glad I get to be up in the tower for once. This is really cool. They don't trust me in here without an escort.
Well, it took some finagling for me to get a key too. So
there we go.
All right, we'll catch everybody back in the studio. So you can see there's quite a lot going on with Caltrain, and they seem to be doing all the right things to handle the challenges that the growing population in the Bay Area will present to our transportation infrastructure. I want to thank Dan for taking the time to talk with us, and I really hope that we can chat again on a future program. If we do, I'll be sure to take my lights with me just in case. I returned to Santa Clara one more time on this week, on the 20th, for the TSG Live Webcast. And I was joined by my friend Robin, who's been a member at the SBHRS for over 30 years. We had some technical challenges, but once we got the stream working right, we talked about maybe a half hour or so about the upcoming open house. That open house is going on right now, and I'm there. Anyway, I'll talk about that in a minute. Robin also showed us the progress that he has made on his N-scale brass McKean car. This was the first time we've had a live webcast on a Saturday, and it was a real challenge to find a quiet place to do it. I'm seriously considering making an executive decision and changing the time of the live webcast to sometime other than noon for that reason. Either that or we're going to have to do it from the tower or something like that, because in the depot doesn't work. I guess we'll find out together on a future episode. On the 21st, I went to record for the Model Railroading with Jack Burgess episode that came out last week. This was a highlight of the month because I had not seen Jack probably since much earlier in the summer, and it's always a great time working with him. Not only because I get a lot of insight about modeling and his approach to modeling that makes a lot of sense to me, but we also end up laughing a lot. I really can't wait to see what topic he has in store for the next time. On October 23rd, I finally got to see another layout that I've been hearing about for a couple of years now. It's a massive private layout owned by one of the DCC Lunch regulars named David Parks. It represents the B&O and the Western Maryland. This layout is rather large, especially for a private one. It has a lot of hidden track as much as it does exposed mainline. And it's also loaded with all kinds of computer control features, and it uses something I hadn't heard of before called LCC, or Layout Command Control. I hope Dave ends up wanting to do a layout tour because this one is pretty unique. I haven't seen anything like his layout before, so it would be an interesting one. On October 26th, I got to go to the California State Railroad Museum in Sacramento. Coincidentally, Robin and John Wiley from the SBHRS were also going on that same day, so we rode with them. And of course, the very first thing we discovered upon our arrival was a donut shop. After the obligatory donut delight, we met and were shown around the museum by a longtime TSG viewer, Drew Struck. We perused 2 of the 3 levels of the museum, then met up with Goofy Gary for lunch. It's always great to see Gary, right? We went back to the museum after lunch to see the model and historic exhibits on the 3rd floor. Then when we were done there, we drove out to Roseville to look at J.R. Davis Yard and, of course, to visit a train shop before returning home. It was a long day, but also a good one. Huge thanks to Drew for taking the time to show us around, and of course to everyone else for the fun and the laughs on the way up and on the way back. So on Saturday the 27th, my top secret volunteer and I went to volunteer at the Ardenwood Society for the Preservation of Carter Railroad Resources Halloween train event. I've often wanted to help out at Ardenwood because our friends Jack and Jackie Burgess are involved there, but I never had the time to do it. This time around, we made the time to do it. I worked the ticket booth with Jack, so we got to see everyone entering and exiting the event. The best part of the experience for me was seeing the people who came, to ride the train leaving all happy. And of course, the laughing in between the waves of visitors was also quite good. We went to the park early in order to go take some still shots for the episode of Bay Area Day Trips that came out today on Channel 2. That episode is about Ardenwood and the attractions there. I'd really love it if you could take a look when you have a free moment. Channel 2 is rolling along, building up more viewership, and it seems like every time there's a new episode of Bay Area Day Trips, more people subscribe. I keep thinking once the Patreon and sponsorship levels get to the point of making the channel self-sustaining, I might be able to increase the frequency of that series on Channel 2. In any case, that's the goal, right? Want to build both channels, Channel 2 is good. On October 29th, I went back to Seth Newman's to record the layout tour of his HO scale layout. Great big thanks to Seth. I had a great time and thoroughly enjoyed seeing the layout in action. This one was a long time coming too, as I've been talking about doing this for the past year or more. Anyway, as I mentioned before, this layout tour will be scheduled in December. As I'm recording this podcast early in the week, I can only tell you now on Saturday when you're watching that I was at the Fern Creek in Western for Halloween. I'm sure it'll be great. If anything unexpected happens, I'm sure I'll share it with you next time. I just realized as I was talking about this past month's activities that this was probably the busiest month of the entire year. And I think I'm going to take it easier in November. My birthday comes up on the 15th and I'm turning 50, so maybe I should relax a little, right? At least that's what it looks like right now. Here's what I have planned so far for November. Today and tomorrow, the SBHRS is having their fall open house event. I'm there right now as you're watching this, recording one of several uploads that will publish today on the hour starting at 10 a.m. So come back each hour to see what's happening at the event. If you think it looks like something you might enjoy, then come down either today or tomorrow and bring a friend too. I'll be working with Jason Hill next week. Remember he showed us his lumber loads, Owl Mountain models, last month? He's a very skilled modeler and he wants to share more of his modeling techniques with you. So we've arranged to get together to record some how-to videos for release sometime either in December or maybe January, but sometime later. I'll be visiting the Golden State Model Railroad Museum in Richmond later in the month in anticipation of a production of their, basically they have 3 layouts there and I'm going to hopefully do layout tours of all of them. Everything I've heard about this place makes it out to be a must-see with 3 large layouts in one building, so I'm looking forward to that a lot. My birthday, as I mentioned a second ago, is on the 15th, and I plan to do exactly nothing that day. I have something planned for the 17th, but that's part of this month's programming. So I'll talk about that when we get to the upcoming programs segment of the podcast here. So, but for now, I'll probably sleep a lot. Before that, though, let's talk about upcoming events at some local organizations here in the Bay Area. The South Bay Historical Railroad Society is having their fall open house today and tomorrow. Mentioned that a second ago. That reminds me, tune back into the channel on the hour, each hour today, for special videos I'm going to be publishing from that event. Then come out to the Santa Clara Depot today or tomorrow. This is one of the best train-related events in the Bay Area, so you really shouldn't miss it. The Sacramento Model Railroad Historical Society is having their fall open house next weekend, November 10th and 11th. They're located at 1990 Grand Avenue in Sacramento. Go to smrhs.com for more information on that. Silicon Valley Lines is having their open house in downtown San Jose on November 10th between 12 and 4. They're at 148 East Virginia Street. You can find more information at siliconvalleylines.com. The event I've been telling you about for the past few months at the San Diego Model Railroad Museum, called the Shake, Rattle, and Roll event, comes to an end on November 16th. So head over if you're in that area and if you haven't already seen it, because it'll be gone soon. On December 1st and 2nd, the San Leandro Historical Railway Society in Thrasher Park in San Leandro is having their model train show and open house. For more information, you can check out slhrs.org. Now, here are the upcoming scheduled programs for the channel in November. I'm doing a couple things a little differently this month. Because I'm at the SBHRS today for the special open house coverage, I'm not going to do a live webcast from the Santa Clara Depot later this month, like we've been doing. Instead, I'll do a special live webcast after the premiere showing of the Chasing Trains episode on November 17th. More about that in a minute. Let me tell you about the Saturday before that. Next Saturday, November 10th, I've mentioned in the recent past about doing more model-related programs as the weather gets less friendly for outdoor activities. I also told you earlier in the summer about going to Hollister to help my friend Kevin Hill install DCC into his garden scale shay. Well, Trevor Park from the Fern Creek and Western in Santa Cruz also went because he's actually done some work on garden scale equipment. We recorded the process and I put it all together in a program that's one part how-to and one part hanging out with the guys. So this is a little bit different because while you'll be able to see the process of how Trevor installs the decoder and speaker into the model, you also get a taste of what it's like to be hanging around when we're being goofy. So there are a couple departures from the task at hand, as well as some talk about other things. And then there's the ribbing. I edit out the most raunchy comments out of the show, but still, if you're easily offended or you don't have a sense of humor, well, I guess we'll see. But I can tell you that we had a great time, and we'd really like to do more shows like this. When it comes out, put a comment in the comment section and let us know what you think about it. Okay, so I told you that there wouldn't be a live webcast from the SBHRS a minute ago. Here's what I'm talking about. On November 17th, let me back up for a second and tell you about this first. There's a new YouTube feature called a premiere, and I have the next episode of Chasing Trains set up to run as a premiere. And what this means is we get to watch the video together online and chat using a live text chat window while it's playing. So like I said a minute ago, I won't be doing a live webcast from the SBHRS that day, which is normally when it would happen. Instead, we'll hang out together during the premiere, and then I'll follow that up with a live webcast from my studio here. During this live webcast, we'll do lots of Q&A, and I also want to cover some information that I've been wanting to share with you, but I keep running out of time. So now before I forget, let's take a look at the trailer for the Chasing Trains episode that's premiering that day.
We're about ready to experience the Hunter Lowe's train chasing extraordinaire. I'm jamming down Warnerville Road. Check out that dust cloud, man.
Oh, we only have 8 minutes, and it's about a 10-minute drive.
Busting balls is never good. Chasing Trains! The chase is back on.
Yeah.
Whee! I noticed your camera has a mustache on it.
You're going to have a lot of fun.
There's a reason why it says 20 miles an hour, Hunter.
Yeah, oh well, whatever.
The guy wants to do 90 miles an hour on the dirt road, but then he stops for a green light.
Shut up! No! And it was yellow.
No, we're not lost. We just can't find what we're looking for.
It's lost.
It's lost.
What are you guys doing, man?
Chasing trains
Yeah.
on the Sierra, one of the greatest railroads on Earth.
Just a quick note, the Patreon train crew got to see that trailer about a month ago as a special preview. You could be getting in on some of that cool sneak peek stuff and some other exclusive stuff too if you become a part of the train crew. Patreon.com/TSG Multimedia. On November 24th, it's Model Railroading 101. Last time, I talked to you about JMRI and Y-throttle, then I showed you how to speed match two locomotives with nothing but a computer and a piece of track and a smartphone. This time, John Wiley will go a little deeper into Decoder Pro, and he's going to show you how to use JMRI with a Digitrack system. This is another good one, so don't miss it. There's a lot of good info in there. Okay, I think that's about it for this episode. Thanks again for all your support. You're making this the best year to date, and certainly the busiest. Please visit the Patreon page and consider supporting the channel. I did the math on the $5 a month support level. It's about 17 cents a day. When you put it that way, it sounds pretty cheap, doesn't it? It goes 100% towards producing the content for this channel, and it'll be appreciated more than you know. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.